Deadlock is out publicly, but I've been playing the closed version of this game for months now, and I can safely say it's become my new life-crippling addiction. Do you also want an addiction? Well, you've come to the right place, because I'm here to shoot my shot today with this game and see if I can revive this dead-ass channel with this beautiful beginner's guide to Deadlock. Okay, I'm overselling that a little bit. I had to rush on some of the edits a bit. Yeah, I don't want to be the last YouTuber to make a video on this, for once. But everything is in here, trust me. Almost 400 hours worth of experience. I'll go over the basics, what the game is, how to lane, how to jungle, how to push the enemy base, how to feed and then blame the team because they didn't join your 1v6 team, how to passively aggressively show them you're not happy with their performance. This guide has got everything you need to become a true MOBA player. Because that's what this game is. Everything is divided in chapters, so you can skip around if you want to see something specific. Yeah, but without anything else, let's just start. So Deadlock is Valve's new 6v6 game that is best described as a third-person shooter that is also a MOBA. If that makes you think of games like Smite, I'd say you're close, but not quite on the spot. Where Smite truly feels like a MOBA, but just with a third-person perspective, Deadlock carries a lot more from typical shooter games. What I mean by saying that is that things that are typically important in shooters, like having decent aim and having decent movement, are also just as important in Deadlock. I mean, on the movement side alone, there are dashes, slides, jumps, double jumps, and you're playing this game not on a two-dimensional plane like you would in other MOBAs, but in a relatively vertical play space where you can be above the opponents, below them, where it's easy to break line of sight behind smaller objects and perhaps surprise opponents. The moment-to-moment gameplay has a lot of that shooter DNA. Headshots are also very important. They often do large amounts of damage compared to normal body shots. And yeah, various items in the shop, because it is still a MOBA, are completely centered around just hitting your shot. At the same time though, when it comes to the game mode, the objectives, the way the map looks, the pacing of the game itself, that is where this is a MOBA true and true. Getting kills, while very beneficial, is often not the only way to win a game of Deadlock. In fact, the primary objective would be to push the lanes of the map to destroy the opponent's buildings and eventually hit their base where you can then kill their Patreon, which is this main big ball that if you kill it, you win the game. This Patreon would be comparable to the Nexus in League of Legends or the core in Heroes of the Storm. Something that you also see that's carried from the MOBA genre is that at the start of every game, your character will be very weak. And it is through killing enemy troopers, which are these little NPCs that spawn in on each of the 4 lanes, that players can get stronger. Strong enough to eventually kill the buildings, walk into the enemy base, and again, kill that Patreon. That is the core of what this game is all about. But truly, there are 100 different ways to do it, with different characters, strategies, items to buy, and so on. And that, I think, is what makes this game interesting. So now that we've covered the absolute basics, like what this game is at its core, let's go down the list and look at all of this stuff a bit more in detail. First up, we have the term laning. That's the first chapter of this video. So what is laning? Well, if we take a look at the map in Deadlock, you'll see that we have 4 different lanes. We have yellow, orange, blue, and purple. And for people with different types of colorblind, each of these lanes also have the first letter of the color on it. So that's how you know which one is which. Now on these 4 lanes, a group of friendly and enemy troopers will spawn in every 30 seconds. They will drop down and they will start fighting each other eternally until the end of times. And your job as a player is to go into one of these lanes and kill the enemy troopers before they're killing yours. The first reason for this, again, is to push out the map. There's a bunch of different buildings on each lane, and those buildings have a lot of health and they do a lot of damage even to players. But if you've got friendly troopers with you pushing those buildings, they can tank up all the damage, die for you, and you can safely hit those structures. Again, this is how you eventually, hopefully, win the game. But even early on, if you feel like you're not getting too much done, getting just a single Guardian can often make a very big difference as the game goes on, because it will take away the nearby item shop for the enemies, which we'll get to soon, and it will award you with extra ability points, which we will also get to soon. Now the second reason, and perhaps the primary reason you want to be killing these troopers early on in the game, even if your opponent is doing the exact same thing and you feel like you're not getting much done, you want to be killing these troopers because every time you kill one, you get some souls. And those souls are Deadlock's main form of currency. Every wave of troopers has 4 different individual troopers in there, and when you kill them, they will all give you the same amount of souls, which would be 75 per kill at the start of the game, amounting to 300 souls per wave. And despite all of the troopers giving you equal souls, that doesn't mean that all troopers are made the same. In fact, every wave will have one special healer trooper that will periodically send out waves of healing that the player can also benefit from. This will often be the only source of sustain for many characters early on in the game, and so you definitely want to make sure you catch these heals whenever you can. Now, I mentioned that killing an enemy trooper gives you 75 souls, and that is true, but there's a little more nuance to it. For one, you would actually need to last hit a trooper to get any souls at all. If a trooper in your lane dies and you or a teammate didn't last hit it, you will get no souls at all. Second up, if you last hit a trooper, you will only get half of the points. When a trooper dies, it will spawn in an orb just above it. This is what we refer to as a soul orb. And after 3 seconds, when that soul orb disappears, or if you decide to shoot it early, that is when you'll get the other half. The thing to note with that soul orb though is that the enemy players can see and shoot this as well. And if they manage to do so before you, they will steal the orb and all the souls it has. This is usually referred to as denying, and it's also a big part of the laning phase. If you manage to deny all of the orbs that your opponents should have had, while also securing your own, that is not only the fastest way to get ahead early, but it will also severely handicap whoever you're laning against in the mid game, because now they have to spend more time farming up before they can buy all their big items. A good tip that I have for you as well is that the troopers can also be last hit with a melee attack, and that does not release a soul orb into the air. Instead, it just gives you the full amount of souls, without the opponent having the chance to even steal them in the first place. As the troopers take damage, you will actually see them change color, which is a good indication of when they're primed to last hit, and they'll even do a little death animation just before they're about to die, which gives you a little bit of time to still last hit them if you're a bit late. As for the melees, you both have a normal melee and a charged melee, with the charged melee doing a lot more damage, making it much easier to last hit troopers with that. But be mindful that this does lock you into a small animation, which can be punished by the opposing players. If they catch you in it, either with a well-timed parry to protect the trooper, you can get stunned off of it, or they can just shoot at you while you're stuck in the melee animation. The troopers and how much souls they give, that does scale up a little bit over time as well. If you pay close attention during the laning phase, you'll slowly see that both the troopers and the orbs that you kill in the lane start to give you ever slightly more souls. For the most part, I'd say this is not all too relevant, but there is one large change that happens at the 10-minute mark that changes how you should be playing the game quite drastically. The big change really is that the troopers after the 10-minute mark no longer give souls upon a kill. And the orb that spawns in after you kill a trooper now holds 100% of the souls. And that means that securing souls and stealing them from opponents, that becomes a lot stronger and a lot more important to do. The other change that happens also at the 10-minute mark is that the souls that the orbs provide will now be split with all of your nearby teammates. This differs from the early game because early on, if a trooper dies because of you or because of a teammate, all the nearby players will get the full amount. So if you're just standing in the lane before the 10-minute mark and your teammate gets all the troopers, then you will still get 100% of the souls there. But again, after the 10-minute mark, this changes, and this is not the case. If you have 2 players in the lane, they will both share the souls from every orb, and thus they will only receive half as much. What this means for gameplay is that ideally, past the 10-minute mark, you never want to have 2 players just sit in the same lane just to soak up all the souls, because they'll both be getting only half of it. Of course, sending multiple players over to a single lane to try and get a quick kill, that is completely fine. And you can also play more together if you're planning to push a building. But as the game goes on, there are other things that become much more beneficial if your goal is to just get more souls and become stronger. Now what those things are, we'll look at in a bit. But before we end the laning part of the video, there is one other thing I want to show you, which is the transit lines that hover over each lane, because they are a big part of laning too. These things might be pretty self-explanatory at first. I mean, you jump on them from the base, it takes you to the lane that it's assigned to, and there you are. But understanding how to get the most use out of these and also when not to use them, it can be a big difference maker when it comes down to early game laning. What I see a lot of new players do, for example, is use the boost that you have right at the start of the game. Maybe to get to their lane faster than the opposing players. And while in very, very rare cases this might have some slight benefits, It's almost never worth doing because the boost has a 300 plus second cooldown. I think it's like 340 seconds in the current patch. And the first troopers, they take a while to get there in the lane as well, because those two will use the transit lines and they spawn in after the players spawn in. So yeah, use the boost wisely, and if you have used it already and you quickly want to know what the cooldown on it is without having to jump back on the transit line, well, you can see it right next to your map. This little thing right here, that currently tells you what your boost cooldown is. Now this video is not going to be an in-depth laning tutorial, like what the best chances are of you winning your matchups, what are good matchups, what are bad matchups, how to win from behind. I'm gonna save that for a later video if people are interested. But I'll say one thing about the boost, if you're looking for a tip, it's best to just save it for when you get low into the lane and you need to heal up. Because if you're in your base, you will heal all the way back to full health, and this transit line boost, it lasts 30 seconds. So you can use it on the way to the base and then also going back into the lane. There's enough time for that. And of course, alternatively, let's say you die early on in the lane, you completely messed up and you made a mistake. Having a boost on your first respawn to instantly get back to your lane, that is also invaluable. There is a bit more to it though, and this is really important to keep in mind, is that you can't just jump on the transit line while you're in combat. First of all, you're not going to be able to jump on it for 2 seconds after being shot at because the game just won't allow you to do it, so you have to make sure you're not getting shot at first. And when you just jump on it for the first time, there are a few seconds there that you can get knocked off, which stuns you and dishes out a lot of damage. This means that you have to be really aware of where the opponents are when you jump on one of these transit lines, or else you might just get punished for trying to get back to base quickly. After 3 seconds of being on the transit line, you'll be safe. You'll see this light appear around your character and over the hands, which indicates that you cannot get knocked down anymore. You can still take damage, you can still get slowed, but you cannot get knocked off. Also, last up about these transit lines is that they only take you as far as you have pushed the lane. At the start, this means you'll always end up in the middle of the map because it is a complete tie, but depending on how the game goes, that also means that by the end, the transit rails might very well take you all the way to the enemy base, or in other cases won't even go so much outside of your own base. And as a bonus, if you manage to break the 2 opponents' guardians all the way at the end of the lane, just before their base, then the transit line will give you a permanent boost. So you won't have to worry about the cooldown anymore. So yeah, that's it for transit lines. Now that we know what laning is and how it works, let's look a bit more precisely at the souls and the player levels that you'll be getting from killing those troopers. So first and foremost, the souls that you gather during a game, no matter where they're from, they will level up your character, which comes with all sorts of benefits. You'll get more weapon damage as you level up, more base health is another, you'll unlock more abilities, you'll get more ability points, which can be spent on upgrading those new abilities, and some characters may even have some special stats that they receive every time that they level up. The amount of souls that you need for a level up is the same for every character, and you can find the exact values by going to the character menu and clicking on this thing right here. You'll see a whole chart of how much souls you need exactly every time you level up. Another place to see this in-game while you're playing is by simply looking at the flask logo here that is right next to your health bar. It will always tell you exactly how many souls you need until the next level up and what you will get with that next level up. And yes, that means that at the start of the game, when you have 0 souls gathered, you only get to choose between unlocking 1 of your 4 abilities, and then you'll only get the next one at 400 souls. Then the next one at 1500, and then you get your ultimate ability at 3000 souls. Now, while you're in the laning phase especially, it is important to keep track of these. Not just how many souls you have, but also how many souls the opponents have. And that goes double for the person you're laning against, because unlocking new abilities, that usually is a huge power spike. Take your ultimate ability for example. If you do a better job at denying your opponent's souls and confirming your own, then you'll likely get your ultimate ability earlier. And as the name implies, getting your ultimate ability gives you a huge advantage over your opponent. The same goes the other way around. If you've missed some troopers and you're behind on souls when your opponent reaches that 3000 mark, you have to be a bit more careful and just play a bit further back. And yes, you can just see everybody's total soul count on the top of the screen, as well as their ultimate cooldown, by the way, which is this circular thingy that shows you exactly how far everybody is from getting their ultimate. So yeah, all of that is just a good thing to keep in mind early on, but also later in the game to see whether you can take a fight or not. As for the ability points, you probably already saw it, but as you get further into the game, you'll get a lot of these. You'll level up a bunch of times, you'll get them from destroying buildings, you'll get them from delivering the urn, which is something that I'll show you as well. But take in mind that to upgrade the second upgrade for any of your abilities or the last one, it takes 2 ability points and then 5. And yes, if you misclick by accident, if you upgrade an ability that you didn't want to upgrade, there is also a way to undo it. You have a window of a few seconds, and this of course only works if you haven't used the ability after you upgraded it. But yeah, if you mess up, you can click on the specific upgrade tier of the ability after purchasing it while holding Alt to undo it and get all the points back. Quick little tip right there. So that's souls and leveling up and getting ability points for you. But the souls you collect, they also go into your bank. And that is what we're going to look at next. So yeah, you might have already noticed this number on the bottom left of your screen, which is the amount of souls that you currently have in your inventory and what you can spend in the shop. Now to see what is in the shop, you can at any time of the game press B, where you'll be met with this menu, which has a bunch of tabs and a bunch of categories of items that buff your character in different ways. This is probably the single most overwhelming part of the game if you're just getting into it, especially if you don't have much experience playing MOBAs. But this item store is actually a lot more straightforward than you might think. And dare I say, it is quite simplistic and streamlined in comparison to more traditional MOBA games. And yeah, even though you can open the shop menu at any time to see what is available, to actually purchase any item at all, you'll first need to be either in your main base or at one of the shops located around the map. At the start of the game, each team will have 5 shops located on their side of the map. There's 1 shop on each of the 4 lanes, and then there's the so-called secret shop in the tunnels in the middle of the map. Now the shops in the lanes, they only stay open for as long as the front guardian of that lane stays alive. I already mentioned that earlier, but yes, that means if you kill the opponent's front guardian, that will take away their item shop. And then that person that is on that lane will have to go back to base or to a different lane every single time they want to buy an item. If all of your guardians are dead and there are no more item shops in your lanes, then you could always go to the secret store. That one stays open indefinitely. But the only caveat is that your enemies can also make use of it. So be careful when you go in there, or you might just not come back out. As for the items in the store, you'll see that there are 3 main categories to choose from. There's weapon, vitality, and spirit. And all of these items respectively buff your weapon damage, your survivability, and your abilities in different ways. On the weapons page, you might find an item that's called Close Quarters, which gives you 25% more damage if you're closer than 15 meters to a target. Or Hollow Point Ward, which gives you 20% more damage so long as you are above 60% health. On the Vitality page, you might find items like extra health regeneration, extra move speed. And then on the Spirit page, you'll find more range, damage, or even additional charges for any of your abilities. Now this video, again, is not going to be a specific guide on what to buy for each character and what items are good when paired together. I'll have more character-specific guides coming soon, if anybody wants to see those at least. Obviously, if you're playing a character that has a shotgun, then getting something that gives you more close range damage is better than getting something that gives you long range damage. Because yeah, you're not going to be hitting people with a shotgun at long range. But yeah, no, as of this video, I just want to focus on the shop as a whole. So besides these 3 categories, you'll also find that all of these items are being divided in subcategories. And these subcategories simply exist to let you know the differences in price. On the top, you've got your cheap items for 500. Then we have the tier 2 items, which are a bit more expensive for 1250. Then there are some more expensive items that you usually only buy at the start of the mid game, and these cost 3000 and up. And then all the late game items, they're on the bottom, the tier 4 items, they are 6300 plus. Now these price ranges, they are nice and all. It helps give you an overview of the shop and the relative strength of each item, and it makes it nice and tidy. But there is also an even more important purpose to these, because no matter what item you buy, it will always come with some additional bonuses too. Either more weapon damage, health, or spirit, regardless of what the item description is. You can see those values here in the shop as well. The weapon items, they come with 6, 10, 14, and 18% extra weapon damage. That is as a baseline, which means that yes, if you decide to get that close quarters perk for 500, that now gives you a flat 6% damage. That is just always there. And then the additional 25% when the player shoots something in close range. For the vitality items, that would be 11, 14, 17, and 20% base health that you just get on top of what that item already does. And then on the spirit tab, it would be 4, 8, 12, and 16 extra spirit power, again, depending on how expensive the item was. Taking this in mind, you can clearly see how stacking just a few of these items can lead to some pretty dramatic results. But before you want to go all crazy with it, there are some limitations to just how much you can stack too. You see, after you buy an item, you will see it appear here, also on the bottom left of the screen. And this is your inventory. And at the start of the game, you'll notice that there are only 12 available slots. And yeah, you guessed it, that is also the maximum number of items that you can have. On top of that, you're also only limited to 4 items per category. So you can only have 4 weapon items, 4 vitality items, and 4 spirit items at an absolute maximum. This is of course so that the player power scaling doesn't go way out of hand in the early to the mid game. But there is also a way to get more than 4 slots. You can get up to a total of 16. And these last 4 slots is usually what the game refers to as flex slots, which, as their name indicates, they do allow you to put any item in there. Meaning that if you wanted to really excel at doing damage and nothing else, yes, you could technically stack up to 8 different items from the weapon category on top of each other. Now, to unlock these flex slots, you'll have to be doing different objectives throughout the game. You have to reach different milestones. The first one would be to destroy an enemy walker, which is this giant 4-legged robot placed a bit deeper into the enemy lanes. You can see them on the map here. The second objective would be to destroy all 4 enemy walkers. The third objective would be to destroy the base guardians of any given lane, which are placed all the way back here. And the fourth objective would be to destroy one of the 2 shrines, which is yet another building, this time placed inside the enemy base. Of course, if you really need an item and can't afford to wait for another flex slot, you always have the option to sell the items you've already purchased, but you will only get half the money back. This isn't really a big deal for the cheaper items, as you only lose out on 250 souls, which is nothing at the later stages of the game. But you definitely do not want to be doing this for any of the more expensive stuff. And that's what the souls are for. Leveling up your character, unlocking abilities, and buying items at the store. So now that we know that, how about we look into some other ways of getting souls than just killing waves of troopers on repeat? Because there's a lot of other ways. And knowing the ins and outs of getting more souls, that can outright just win you games alone in Deadlock. So yeah, let's have a look. One term that you will hear players throw around a lot is jungle. And what this usually refers to is all the area of the map that is not on the lanes. Now in Deadlock, this doesn't look like much of a jungle, but in League of Legends or Dota, it does. And this term jungle has sort of just carried over from those games. Now what you'll find in between the lanes, in the concrete jungle so to speak, are mostly just a lot of neutral camps, which are camps with monsters there that will not attack you unless you attack them first. Now the reason you might want to go for these camps and kill these monsters there is because killing them gives you a bit of souls. And especially if once you get to a later stage in the game where you're fast enough to clear these camps fast because you have all your abilities, then it becomes very beneficial to start doing these in addition to clearing out the waves. Deadlock has a few different type of camps, all with varying difficulties and rewards. You'll have the easy camps, which are indicated with a small triangle and located on these locations. Then you have the medium camp, which is just the same small triangle but with a small dash underneath it. And then there's the hard camp, which also has a triangle but with 2 of those dashes. The main difference is just how much damage these monsters dish out, how much health they have, and also how much souls they give you for killing them. There is another type of camp though, and they're indicated with this rectangle thing on the map with a little circle in it, which are slot machine camps, I think. These are different because in addition to 1 or 2 monsters, they also have this slot machine type of thing that if you melee it, it will grant you souls, and you can melee it over and over again until it is empty. 2 things to note about the slot machines is that, well, every time you melee it, you do take some damage. So you don't want to die to that. That would be very embarrassing. And then 2, you should always use your heavy melee because when you use your heavy melee, more souls come out, which means you have to hit it less and thus you'll be taking less damage in the process. Here are all the initial spawn times for the camps because they do not spawn in at the start of the game, and also how long it takes for each camp to respawn after you clear it. Keep in mind that a camp needs to be cleared completely for the respawn timer to start, If you leave one monster at a camp alive, that monster will just be there indefinitely and no new ones will spawn at that camp, meaning that you can't farm it for extra money. So yeah, this is something that you want to avoid doing, but it can be used as a strategy as well. What if you were to secretly invade the enemy's jungle and kill every single monster in their camps except one, so that when the enemies go there, they'll just find that one monster that won't give them too many souls, and they'll still have to wait for the full respawn timer after they kill it. Something to also watch out for while doing these camps is that your opponents can hear you clear them if they're the right distance away, or if they're paying attention and looking at these logos on the minimap. Once you kill a camp, those logos disappear for a bit. So if somebody is paying attention, they will be able to see what camps are currently being taken right now. Which might also be another reason why keeping just one monster alive if you're doing enemy camps might be a safer way to do it. The souls that you get from these neutral camps, they will also at first be unsecured, which simply means that if you were to die, you will lose all of those and they will drop as a big pile on your dead location for either your teammates or the enemies to pick up. Those unsecured souls, they will become secured over time. You'll see the amount always changing with every second. But if you have a lot of them and you want to just secure them all at once, the best way to do that is to buy an item. You can use unsecured souls to buy an item as well, which will turn all of the souls that you use to buy that item into secured souls right away. Then there's also the mid-boss, which is located, surprise surprise, in the middle of the map. That one spawns in at 10 minutes. But to take this, it usually requires at least a good chunk of your team, and I strongly recommend against even trying to do this unless a good amount of players on the opposing team are dead. He does quite a bit of damage and always attacks the person that is closest to him. So unless you are super beefy or have like a lot of bullet lifesteal or something, you'll need a lot of other people to take this boss with you. The other thing with this boss is that he doesn't just have a lot of health, he also has a shield that recharges all the time, and it recharges very rapidly. This shield essentially serves as a damage check that you'll constantly have to meet in order to wear down the health bar of the boss. So even if you have all the sustain in the world, you still cannot kill this boss by yourself if you also don't have the damage. The last thing as to why you don't just want to be doing the boss randomly is that once the boss is to half health, a sound cue will play for everybody in the game to hear. And that includes your opponents. And then the same goes for when you kill the boss. First, you will hear this roar when somebody is doing the boss and got them to half HP. And then you'll hear the announcer say that the Rejuvenator is spawning in. The Rejuvenator is the last part of this boss, because after the boss dies, you don't just instantly get the souls as that you would with normal camps. No, when you kill this boss, it spawns in a crystal on the top of the pit that slowly goes down, and whichever team manages to break this crystal with a charged melee first, they get all the rewards, no matter what team actually killed the boss. This reward comes in the form of a temporary buff. This is called the Rejuvenator, which allows all the players on the team that received it to respawn 50% faster on their next death. And then it also buffs the health and the damage of all friendly troopers to make pushing the enemy base a bit easier.
Finally, I can walk amongst you and give you your reward.
So that was the boss, but that is not the last objective on the map, because there is one more thing that gives you a lot of souls. I mentioned it earlier, but it is the soul urn that, just like the boss, also respawns in at 10 minutes. And despite Valve's best efforts to make players notice it, the urn usually goes overlooked in a lot of the newer player games. But running the urn, as it is called, is definitely worth your time throughout the mid game. The urn always spawns in on either the yellow or the purple lane, and the goal with that is to simply pick it up and bring it to the other side of the map, upon which you'll be rewarded with a lot of souls. The location that you have to bring it to is always the same. If the urn spawns in on the yellow lane, you'll have to bring it to purple, and if it spawns in on purple, you have to bring it to yellow. You'll see a large indicator on the map for both the urn and the drop-off location that shows you exactly where to put it, but the enemies see it as well. And if you're running the urn, the opponents will see the delivery spot highlighted in red. So be careful when you actually drop it off. Now all the souls that are in the urn, they will be split amongst the team fairly, equally through 6 players. Except for the person that delivered it, they get a 25% soul bonus. They usually get the chance to melee all the souls coming out of the urn, which is all extra souls as well. And they get an extra ability point. So yeah, definitely worth doing if you can deliver it. Now that covers it for a lot of the most important stuff on the map, but there's some other things here as well that definitely shouldn't be ignored. And if you have some spare time over between doing all the other stuff I just mentioned, then this would be the next thing on your list. So all around the map, you'll have these boxes and golden vases that, once you break them, have a chance to give you something. The boxes, they speak for themselves. They have like a small chance to give you free souls, which is just an extra trooper kill pretty much. And the golden vases, they have a chance to give you a random but permanent stat boost to your character that you will keep until the game is finished. There's different type of stat bonuses that can be in these golden vases. You'll have extra weapon damage, ammo, rate of fire, spirit power, cooldown reduction. You've got maximum health, all that sort of stuff. And how much you'll actually get, that depends on how late it is in the game. The buffs that come from these golden vases early on are not as high as the ones you'll get during the mid game. The one other type of buff that you'll also find on the map are the temporary ones, which can be found on these two bridges in between the two side lanes. And yeah, if you pick these up, you'll feel the difference. It's more health regeneration, more ammo, that type of stuff. But the difference is a lot bigger at the cost of those buffs only lasting 2 minutes. And now you know most of the things that you need to get started with Deadlock. We've looked at most of the important stuff on the map, but to round up this video, I'll show you some more smaller gimmicks that you can try to make use of during your games that didn't really fit in any of the previously mentioned categories, but I think they're still important to just keep in mind. And the thing we'll start off with are the cosmic veils. That's what they're called in game, and you might have seen these already all around the map. They are essentially one-way vision blockers. This means you can shoot through these things, you can walk through them, you can do anything that you would usually be able to do. They just prevent you from seeing any opposing players through them, if you stand on the wrong side of it, because they only block vision in one direction. Functionally, I think they're very similar to the bushes or smoke vents in other MOBA games. Something that you can hide behind or inside of to possibly get the jump on your opponents when they try to make a quick rotation. And you'll notice that these veils are placed in, around, and between every lane and most points of interest. Breaking line of sight also prevents your opponents from using their targeted abilities on you, which means that even if they know exactly where you are, using these veils can still provide very large benefits. Next thing I want to show you is these different teleporters that are placed around the map, mostly from yellow lane to purple lane, and these are pretty self-explanatory. They just teleport you back and forth, but I wanted to mention them because a lot of people often overlook them. They're very useful if you want to make a quick rotation or catch a quick wave on the other side of the map, but you don't want to use your boost to transit all the way back to base, and they also work great for ganking. There's also these various trampolines that send you upwards or sideways all around the map, and they are also good for making quick rotations, not to the other side of the map, but more towards the middle. There's also some rooftops that you can climb on top of and that you can use to fight players that are below. That usually gives you a pretty good advantage and a good oversight of the fight. But do note that most of the taller buildings do have these antennas that periodically damage players with electricity if they stay up there for too long. So yes, you can use the building rooftops to make some crazy rotations, maybe take a good fight for a bit, but you're not really going to be able to camp up there. The last tip that I have for you is to make good use of the ping system. The ping system in this game is surprisingly good. You can ping specific opponents, which will highlight them in red for everybody of your team to see. You can ping specific cooldowns on abilities to let the team know you're ready to go in, or maybe that they should wait a little bit. You can ping on the minimap to show where you're going, or maybe tell your teammates where to watch out and whatnot. And you can even draw on the minimap to show your team that you are unhappy with their performance. The ping system is really good, okay? So if you don't want to use your mic, use that. There's of course a lot more that I want to cover because as the title of the video suggests, this is just a beginner's guide, something to get you started right away without being completely lost. But that also means that some of the more advanced stuff has been left out, like movement. I mentioned at the start that unlike with regular MOBAs, your aim and especially your movement in this game are very, very important. It is quite literally what separates this game from all the other MOBAs out there. And I mentioned that there's dashes and slides and all sorts of moves, but I haven't really shown you any of the advanced movement tech. And that is what we are doing tomorrow or the day after. I've got an advanced movement guide coming up soon. So if anybody wants to see that, stay tuned for that. I want to end this video with just a final message for maybe the long-term subscribers that are watching this video or thinking like, what the hell is this? What kind of direction is this going into? Because I thought this was a retrospectives channel and now we're doing Deadlock guides. Like, what is this? Like, why make this switch all of a sudden? And while the truth is, guys, I'm simply done making retrospectives for a bit. I've made them for like a couple years now, and with the higher quality on them that I pursue, it just takes me way too long. I'm spending like 3 months on a single video. And honestly, I started this channel because I like video games and I want to go back to playing just a bit more games. Now, for a long time, I was searching for a new main game to grind and I couldn't really find it. And then suddenly I got access to the Deadlock closed alpha and I instantly fell in love. It's like a perfect combination of Heroes of the Storm and The Division just mashed in one game. So yeah, I'm just going to shoot my shot with this. It's a game that I really, really enjoy and I really believe in. And if I were to just be able to make this channel work with Deadlock, I'd just be very happy with that. I don't need this to become big. I don't need to become rich. I just hope that this can become sustainable is the word. Which working 4 months on the Starfield video to only get like $500 from it from AdSense, that is just, I wouldn't call that, sustainable. Let's just put it like that. So sorry to my existing audience for swapping channel directions once again for the 5th time now in my career. But hey, if I don't end up making content that I enjoy, then what is the point of all of this to begin with, right? So we're going to start from zero again with this video. Let's see how it goes. And that also means that if you're new here and you're interested in Deadlock, I'm going to just have to ask you to subscribe, maybe leave a like on this video to help it boost up to a wider audience. We're going to need it. Don't worry, I'm not going to start asking for this every single time. Just this once to hopefully get this whole thing started. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful and I'll see you tomorrow or the day after with another video. Bye guys.